The FIA disqualifies Hamilton after the Monaco Grand Prix for using less fuel to reduce the car's weight and go faster. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. The afternoon in Monte Carlo had begun just like any other edition of the prestigious Monaco Grand Prix, a delicate blend of glamour, intensity, and that almost mythical sense of unpredictability that only this narrow, technical street circuit can deliver. The roar of the yachts in the harbor, the shimmer of high fashion in the paddock, and a sharp tension hanging in the air created a scene soaked in tradition and danger. Lewis Hamilton, behind the wheel of his 2025 Challenger, had delivered a composed, calculated, and virtually flawless performance over the grueling 78-lap marathon. In a car that hadn't always been the fastest throughout the weekend, Hamilton extracted every ounce of performance available, pushing the limits of traction at Saint-Devote, threading the needle through the Mirabeau hairpin, and dancing with millimeter precision past the unforgiving barriers at Portier. Every lap had been a masterclass in experience, restraint, and precision under pressure. When he finally crossed the checkered flag in fourth place, it was with the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. He had brought home critical points, valuable for a championship fight that, while perhaps not tailor-made for him this season, still held whispers of opportunity. The celebrations in the paddock were measured, a soft exhale rather than a full eruption. Cameras caught glimpses of him exchanging respectful nods with his engineers, accepting a bottle of water, and removing his gloves with calm deliberation. There was a certain peace on his face, as if he had done everything in his control, and had no regrets. But that serenity wouldn't last long. Just as the team began winding down, with the post-race debrief on the horizon and thoughts already drifting toward the next Grand Prix, an unexpected storm erupted with the force of 1,000 headlines. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. Roughly 15 minutes after Hamilton had parked his car in Parc Ferme, a pair of FIA technical delegates, clipboard in hand, approached the Mercedes garage with a stiffness in their posture that was impossible to ignore. There was no urgency, no raised voices. Just the cold, clinical precision of professionals about to detonate a bomb of scandal beneath the surface of normality. One of the engineers, stone-faced, requested immediate access to car number 44. A few quiet nods followed. The car was rolled onto the scales for the routine post-race weight inspection, normally a forgettable formality. But what happened next was anything but routine. The digital screen blinked, then locked into a reading, 0.32 grams under the FIA's mandatory minimum weight limit. The number was minuscule, microscopic even. Less than the weight of a paperclip. Less than the breath of dust floating in the Mediterranean air. But to the unyielding regulations of Formula One, it was catastrophic. According to Article 6.5.2 of the FIA's technical rulebook, any car finishing below the minimum weight, even by the smallest margin, must be automatically disqualified. No hearings. No appeals. No grace. Shock swept through the garage like an electrical surge. The air itself seemed to thicken. Engineers froze, laptops still open. Team principals murmured into headsets. Somewhere in the background, a mechanic swore under his breath. Within seconds, the weight result had been confirmed a second time, then a third. There was no error. It was real. Hamilton, still in his race suit but without the helmet, had been in the middle of a conversation with his performance engineer. A soft chuckle from something said a few seconds earlier faded as his chief engineer briskly approached him, leaned in close, and whispered something into his ear. Whatever the words were, they instantly erased the calm from his expression. His smile evaporated, replaced by a furrowed brow and an intensity that hadn't been there moments before. Less fuel? Minimum weight? That makes no damn sense, he barked, barely containing his disbelief. His voice echoed off the metal walls of the garage. His tone wasn't angry yet, but sharp electric, charged with the frustration of a man blindsided. He turned sharply, practically marching toward the team hospitality area, eyes scanning for someone, anyone, who could give him clarity. Behind him, the murmurs were turning into questions, the questions into accusations, the accusations into rumors. Social media exploded within minutes. Phones buzzed. Hashtags like hashtag Hamilton disqualified, hashtag Monaco shock, and hashtag FIA controversy began trending worldwide. Commentators on Sky and F1 TV were caught mid-sentence, stumbling through breaking news bulletins as they tried to verify the story in real time. Fans around the world who had already turned off their TVs began switching them back on in disbelief. How could a driver of Hamilton's caliber, with a team of Mercedes' reputation, fall victim to such a basic error? Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. And yet, the number didn't lie. The data was what it was. Even a mere 0.32 grams under the limit meant the entire result was now in jeopardy. What had been a hard-fought fourth place, earned through skill, endurance, and strategy, was now suspended over the abyss of regulation. Hamilton, still pacing, finally entered the team office, where senior engineers, team lawyers, and Toto Wolff himself were now gathered in a tight huddle around a screen, whispering urgently. Papers rustled. Emails flew. Eyes were locked on data streams, telemetry, fuel flow charts, and sensor readouts. They were looking for an explanation, any explanation, that could save them from this nightmare. Was it a fuel miscalculation? A sensor glitch? A calibration error in the scales? Could it have been the result of debris shedding during the race? Every possibility was being dissected, but time was running out. The stewards were preparing a formal report. The ruling would come down soon. And unless a miracle occurred, Hamilton's result would be erased. Meanwhile, in the media pen, reporters were already preparing their questions, while rival drivers glanced sideways, whispering among themselves. The paddock, always a place of whispers and alliances, began to buzz with opportunism. Some were sympathetic, others quietly satisfied. In the ruthless world of Formula One, one man's misfortune is another team's advantage. Hamilton re-emerged moments later, jaw tight, his usual media composure now strained. He didn't speak to the cameras yet, but his eyes told the story. Fury, confusion, betrayal, not directed at anyone in particular, but radiating from the raw unfairness of being punished over a fraction of a gram. This wasn't racing. This was bureaucracy swallowing the soul of competition. But the rules were clear. The margins in Formula One are cruel. There are no exceptions for legends. The shockwave hit the paddock with the force of a thunderclap. Within seconds, it was all anyone could talk about. Engineers whispered behind laptops, rival drivers exchanged glances, and team principals rushed to their radios. Mechanics stopped mid-task, phones buzzed non-stop, and journalists sprinted toward the Ferrari hospitality suite. Social media exploded in real time, hashtags trending worldwide, as breaking news alerts hijacked sports channels across the globe. Lewis Hamilton, disqualified from the Monaco Grand Prix after post-race inspection, reveals his Ferrari weighed 0.32 grams under the minimum requirement due to a miscalculation in remaining fuel. The disbelief was immediate, but the outrage followed just as fast, especially from Hamilton himself. As soon as he stormed into the Ferrari motorhome, every face turned. Conversations died, forks froze halfway to mouths, and all eyes locked onto the seven-time world champion, whose fury radiated like a furnace about to ignite. His voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade as he barked, "Where's Fred? Get Vasseur. Now." Security barely had time to inform the team boss before Hamilton pushed through the doors of the private lounge. Frederick Vasseur, who had put his reputation and Ferrari's future on the line by bringing the veteran British legend to Maranello, stood waiting, composed but clearly bracing for impact. Hamilton didn't even wait for formalities. The second he entered the room, his words detonated with emotion, frustration, and disbelief. "Are you serious right now? Are we seriously losing a podium, no, a win, because someone couldn't get the fuel numbers right? 0.32 grams under? That's less than a damn raindrop, Fred. You're telling me that's enough to erase everything I did out there today?" His voice rose with every word. He stepped closer to Vasseur, his hands clenched, his body trembling not from exhaustion, but fury. "I fought like hell. I held off Norris lap after lap. I defended from Russell with barely any grip left. I risked the car breaking into the chicane to hold position against Alonso. And you're telling me all of that means nothing? That a miscalculation, not my driving, decided the outcome." Vasseur didn't flinch, but the tension between them crackled like electricity. The Frenchman spoke slowly, as if choosing each word with the precision of a scalpel. "Lewis, I understand how you feel. But this isn't negotiable. The FIA measured the weight, and we were under. Barely, but under. That's grounds for disqualification, full stop. There's no room for interpretation. No room." Hamilton's eyes widened in disbelief. "There's no room for this kind of incompetence either. You promised a team ready to win. You promised professionalism. This isn't a junior team, Fred, this is Ferrari. And today, you made us look like amateurs. With that, he ripped off his team jacket and hurled it onto the couch so hard that a cushion flew to the floor. The gesture wasn't just symbolic, it was volcanic. Then, just as the room teetered on the edge of total combustion, the door creaked open again. Charles Leclerc entered, still in his racing suit, holding a celebratory bottle of water. The podium champagne barely dried on his overalls. The Monegasque driver had finished third, finally tasting glory in front of his home crowd. But as he stepped into the storm, he immediately understood what was unfolding. Rather than retreat, Leclerc walked forward and delivered his own comment, equal parts cold and calculated, with that ever-so-slight edge of sarcasm that made Hamilton's blood boil further. "Come on, Lewis," he said, casually leaning against the wall. "It was a mistake. But you, of all people, should know the FIA doesn't care about context. Rules are rules. And they apply to everyone, yes, even to you." Hamilton turned sharply, eyes narrowing. "Don't patronize me, Charles. You think this is about ego? This is about integrity. About the principle of the fight. I earned that win. I bled for it. I don't care if it was 0.32 grams or 32 grams. The difference was nothing to do with my performance. And yet, here we are. Disqualified like we were running illegal fuel or something." Leclerc didn't back down, but his smile faded. "I get it. I do. But none of us get exceptions. You knew that when you signed up." Silence fell again, but it wasn't peaceful, it was volcanic. Hamilton's chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. He turned back to Vasseur, his voice lower now but still laced with venom. "This isn't over. I joined this team to win titles, not to be robbed by our own mistakes. Fix this, Fred. Or I swear, you'll lose more than just a race." And with that, Hamilton turned and walked out, leaving a room full of tension, an angry silence, and a team now questioning whether their greatest signing in years was about to become their greatest mistake. Hamilton turned sharply on his heels, his eyes flashing with indignation, nostrils flared as he stared Leclerc down like a lion confronting a rival in his own territory. "Oh, you're going to lecture me on the FIA now, Charles? You." His voice was sharp, cutting like glass. "You, who spent years begging for respect outside Monaco and still can't get it. You, who's never even come close to winning a world championship, let alone handling the pressure of defending one. Don't come at me with your cheap morality plays. Save them for the press conferences where someone might actually believe the hero act." Leclerc's jaw clenched, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of something raw, pride, pain, maybe both. But he didn't back down. He took a step forward, eyes locked onto Hamilton's, his voice low but firm, every syllable landing with intention. "I'm not speaking from some moral high ground, Lewis. I'm speaking from reality. From facts. You're the one who's unraveling. You can't handle the truth staring you in the face, that your era is over. That the sport has moved on. And you can't control it anymore." That line hit like a sledgehammer. The energy in the Ferrari hospitality unit changed instantly, like the drop in pressure before a storm. Conversations stopped. People turned. The silence was heavy, loaded with invisible wires of tension stretching to their limits. Engineers, PR staff, mechanics, they all moved without thinking, instinctively forming a human buffer between the two titans as if drawn by the gravitational pull of impending chaos. Everyone could feel it. One more word, one wrong move, and it might erupt into something far beyond a war of words. Frédéric Vasseur, caught off guard, raised his voice louder than he had in months, a rare show of authority. "Enough. Both of you, step back. Now." His command sliced through the atmosphere like a whip, and for a second, both Hamilton and Leclerc froze, their chests heaving, eyes still locked, before turning in opposite directions. The standoff had ended, but the damage lingered in the air. Hamilton didn't say a word as he left the hospitality area. Not a glance back. Not a goodbye. Just a storm wrapped in silence. He walked straight to the motorhome, shut the door behind him with a thud, and launched the encrypted video conference link. Seconds later, the familiar face of Toto Wolff appeared on screen, calm as ever, his expression somewhere between surprise, concern, and a deep, quiet understanding. "Lewis?" Toto asked, his voice carefully measured, as if unsure whether to brace for fury or confession. Hamilton leaned closer to the screen, his face showing the toll of frustration, disappointment, and something deeper, disillusionment. "Toto, I didn't call to complain. I just needed to tell someone who gets it." He paused, exhaling as if trying to force the weight off his chest. "I miss it. The clarity. The professionalism. The discipline. At Mercedes, even when we lost, we knew what we were doing. We never had to guess. We didn't panic. Every component, every gram, every millisecond, measured, exact. That car was an extension of my instincts. It didn't matter what track, what weather, we were ready. We never had to argue over stupid, avoidable mistakes. Never once did I have to wonder if the car was legal. Never." Toto nodded slowly, eyes narrowing just slightly. He understood that this wasn't just about disqualification or car weight or Leclerc's barbed remarks. It was about something breaking, something fundamental in Lewis. "I know what you're feeling," he said finally. "Ferrari's different. Always has been. There's passion, but there's chaos. They live on the edge of emotion. But you built your career on control. Precision. Stability. I understand why this feels like betrayal." Lewis clenched his jaw, shaking his head. "They call it romantic. I call it sloppy. That 0.32 grams? That's not bad luck. That's negligence. And what's worse? Everyone shrugs like it's just part of the game. No accountability. No outrage. Just more excuses and platitudes." Toto tilted his head. "You're not wrong. But this is Formula One, Lewis. It's brutal. It's beautiful. And it never waits. You've always stood above the rest because you didn't crumble. You adapted. But I'll be honest, 0.32 grams, it is brutal. I would have fought that penalty tooth and nail. That's not racing justice. That's bureaucracy winning over common sense." Hamilton nodded slightly, lips pressed into a thin line. "And that's the problem. I didn't come back for bureaucracy. I came back to win. But it's hard to lead when no one knows what leadership looks like. I'm surrounded by talent that refuses to grow. By voices too scared to speak. And Charles? He thinks shouting louder makes him the alpha. He doesn't realize that real champions don't need to yell. They deliver. Week after week. Year after year." Wolff studied him for a moment. "Then remind them, Lewis. Remind them who you are. Not with words. With laps." The screen went black a moment later, but the echo of that conversation lingered in Hamilton's mind like a battle cry. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Lewis Hamilton stood motionless in the back of the Ferrari garage, arms crossed tightly across his chest, his eyes burning with a mixture of rage and disbelief. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low but sharp, slicing through the silence like a blade. "There's no margin for error when you're not with Mercedes," he muttered, his tone filled with bitter finality. "At Mercedes, we were a machine. Every piece fit. Every weekend was a calculated, measured strike. This is roulette. Every race weekend here is a gamble, a throw of the dice. They promised me a winning team. Instead, they're handing me excuses. Excuses wrapped in red." Toto Wolff, watching from the paddock afar during his post-race media duties, was caught briefly on camera. No words came from his mouth, but his expression said more than an entire press conference ever could. It was a storm of emotions colliding in one fleeting moment: pride, grief, a trace of guilt, and the unmistakable weight of knowing he had let go of one of the greatest drivers in Formula One history. His jaw clenched ever so slightly, and his eyes, distant yet focused, betrayed a whisper of what-ifs. Online, the storm had already detonated with full force. Within minutes of the FIA's announcement, social media erupted into chaos. Some fans were incandescent with fury, rallying behind Lewis, labeling the decision a disgrace, a mockery of the sport. "You don't penalize greatness for 0.32 grams, one tweet read, garnering over 500,000 likes. Another called it a witch hunt against a 7-time world champion. But the backlash wasn't unanimous. Others reveled in the controversy, mocking the outrage and insisting that rules are rules, no matter the name stitched on the racing suit. The hashtags #HamiltonOut, #FIAInjustice, #Monaco Madness, and #FuelGate 2025 lit up trending lists across continents. with fans and pundits alike firing off their takes in real time. Meanwhile, the television networks were in overdrive. Sky Sports cut immediately to emergency coverage, where Martin Brundle, never one to mince words, offered his trademark blend of candor and insight. This, ladies and gentlemen, is where you see the difference between a truly elite outfit and one still figuring out how to be one. 0.32 grams is nothing. Nothing. But it's everything. It's the line between glory and catastrophe. And that line tonight just buried Ferrari. Inside the Scuderia's hospitality suite, the mood was electric, charged not with celebration but with tension so thick it was practically audible. Conversations dropped to whispers. Eyes darted. Some engineers looked away when Hamilton passed. Others avoided meeting Vasseur's gaze altogether. One senior mechanic, overheard in a hallway, murmured to a colleague, "He's done. The trust is gone." Another source close to the team leaked that Charles Leclerc, usually calm and diplomatic, had requested a closed-door meeting with team leadership, specifically to clarify internal respect boundaries. There were even suggestions that Leclerc felt Hamilton's presence had become a destabilizing force, both technically and psychologically. The paddock had seen turmoil before, but this felt different. This wasn't just a bad day at the office. This was structural damage, cracks in the very foundation Ferrari had tried so hard to solidify with the signing of a legend. And all of it detonated over 0.32 grams of underweight fuel, less than the mass of a paperclip. Hamilton himself vanished from public view as quickly as the scandal had spread. He skipped the team dinner, left his hotel before dusk, and ignored every media request thrown his way. No press statement, no interviews, no carefully worded apology or clarification. Just one haunting Instagram story, a plain black background, white text, nothing else. It read, "Excellence leaves no room for mistakes. 0.32 grams. Unacceptable." Within minutes, it was shared across the motorsport world like gospel, as if the message itself confirmed what many already suspected. Something inside Lewis had shifted. This wasn't just about Monaco. This was about identity, legacy, betrayal. Behind the scenes, sponsors were growing uneasy. Ferrari's board scheduled an emergency call with Vasseur. Journalists dug up archival footage from his final days at Mercedes, comparing body language, tone, even micro-expressions. "This isn't just about fuel," one analyst said on a late-night panel. "It's about whether Hamilton belongs in red at all." In Monte Carlo, a place where legends are born and reputations are ruined, the ghosts of 2025 now haunt every corner. The casinos, the yachts, the champagne, all felt oddly out of place in a weekend defined by disgrace, division, and disbelief. In a matter of hours, the streets that once echoed with celebration became a stage for Formula One's most chilling drama in years. And as the sun set over the Riviera, Lewis Hamilton, seven-time world champion, living legend, global icon, sat alone, not in defeat, but in disillusionment. For the first time in years, it wasn't the stopwatch or the stewards or even the car that had let him down. It was the system. It was the promise. It was everything he had built his trust upon. For 0.32 grams, a career's chapter may have closed. And Formula One, once again, was forced to confront the unforgiving precision of its own brutality.